Yeah, obviously, pretty technical things that we're doing here, obviously with CityLab, and I mean, they're pioneering, and I think there's a lot of knowns, and then there's obviously a lot of unknowns. Some of the comments he makes me nervous about design, because from my experience, high design often costs a lot of money, and execution in that can be challenging. Show of hands, how many architects do we have in the room? Just out of curiosity. Yeah, so a lot of designers. So I apologize if I offend anybody. How many developers in the room? Oh, awesome! Yeah, these are the people that matter. Manos, give me. No, I'm just kidding. Manos gave me 15 minutes to go through the before run. I think it's like the most critical part, and he wants me to cover it within 15 minutes. I think it was a unique opportunity for us to be involved. We've worked across the housing spectrum and from Canada. And when Manos first kind of showed us all of this stuff, I said, well, how do the numbers work? He said, we kind of figured that out. I was like, yeah, that's going to be pretty important. So, I think they've done some tremendous work, and we try to do our best to kind of support that. He mentioned we've delivered over 500 middle housing units, and you start to realize what we thought was normal was actually pretty unique. Sorry, I can go back to that slide, but I didn't realize that this wasn't happening pretty easily throughout North America, and then you start to realize how difficult it is to build at this scale, and it becomes pretty apparent that not many people are doing that. And so although we've worked, both Darlene, who's here as well, my partner is a planner, and we've both worked in the development space and worked on large-scale projects, heritage restoration, medical centers, up to 250 unit, 7-story buildings, we started to realize that the middle was different. And so as we started to recognize that, we worked on this idea of how do we take what we've learned in this housing space and figure out if it could scale across North America. And so we've had some early traction. In Canada, we were awarded a housing supply challenge last year through the federal government, which really exponentially pushed our growth. And so if you have a chance, I'd encourage you to visit our website. We've built pre-approved plans in multiple municipalities where you get to a building permit within 10 business days. We've implemented GIS tools where you can search up your address and it'll tell you whether or not your site could be applicable for one of those plans. We built a community of over 1,000 people, and so we've continued to kind of embark on this philosophy of middle housing isn't only missing because the housing form is missing, is the ecosystem is actually missing, and how do we get more people to be a part of it? And so when Manos and I and the team were chatting, he kind of approached us with this idea of how do we take the existing lots, and not all of them, but a few of them, and figure out what performance could look like. So we ran over 72 different performas with over 25 different white card models to try to arrive at what does a financial feasible project look like. And so these were the 4 sites that we chose, and these were the models that we landed on. He talked a bit about the fair market value, and so these are the actual appraised numbers that will come out in the report, and you can see there's quite a range in terms of the cost. So I'm going to go through each one of these. Just so you know, this is not an actual, you can't sue us. We kind of didn't put the ROIs on here specifically because, like Manos said, the inputs are really reflective of what you get in the outputs, and we took the assumptions, our best understanding of chatting with people who are in the room as experts and developers who gave us their best understanding of market and as well as what some of the build costs were. And so if you're new to infill, these are kind of the big 4 cost buckets. You have your land basis, your hard costs, your soft costs, and then the unknowns, which seem to be a part of every project. You just try to mitigate those. Soft costs are extensive. They're generally out of pocket. These are often costs that you have to pay for well in advance. I think the cool thing about this program is the Genesis LA partnership, the ability to get access to up to $200,000 as you kind of go through this process of coming up with your plans and your architecture and not having to pay for the land and transact on it until you actually are closer to a building permit is also a pretty fantastic opportunity. These were the assumptions that we proceeded with. So again, if you can build for less than $400 a square foot, you're in a really good position. If you're building for more than that, then good luck. I took some assumptions on soft costs, obviously commissions on sale, construction interest rates, and terms of loans and loan to costs. And so again, these were the assumptions, and you'll see the outputs as we kind of go through them. Again, we're talking about a pretty wide array of different communities. So based on our understanding of those communities and what potential sale options are, these are based on square foot prices that we saw market comparables trading for. Manos already talked about this. Just again, this idea of can these programs actually help buyers purchase at higher prices? He showed a very similar graphic, and we're just reinforced and believe that those programs can be incredibly lucrative, and you'll see it here as I keep going. I should premise that these are terminologies, but the way that we model these is every single unit is a sale unit. So as we said earlier, the program and the modeling was done that every unit has to be transacted and sold. And so as you look at these, and I'll walk through each one, it's with the assumption that all these are sold. So this is the correlation matrix that we built, and I'll go through it in a bit of detail, but I think what's really important here is to know that we ran 5 different scenarios of land basis costs. So obviously the cheaper the land is based on the highest level of affordability is being met. Again, Manos has kind of said that the city hasn't really stipulated what those affordability requirements are going to be. So we kind of just made some assumptions and guesses. Where you're seeing darker green is a higher return on investment. Anywhere you're seeing red is kind of a lower return on investment. The yellow is kind of like 10%. So in terms of like in your mind, when you look at this correlation, that's what we're talking about. So the first site that we looked at was the Wilton site. These are some of the regulatory frameworks that went into that site in terms of what were the requirements. This one has a base yield of 4 units, and so I'll go to the model next year. So we ended up going with 4 primary units, 2 detached units, one additional unit there. I think we ended up at this just based on not obviously maximizing the FAR, but just trying to come up with a model that we thought that could work on this site. And so Wilton is an interesting site. It's one of the most expensive ones, but it's also one of the ones that I think has some challenges, but options. Another parcel here is the Wilmington site. Up to 11 primary units. I'm not going to read these because you guys can obviously see them. The model that we ran here, this one actually didn't have a parking stall, so we went with 4 large primary units and 4 smaller 1-bedroom units, and again, all of these would be sold. Obviously, parking, as Manos said, is going to be market dependent, so this one went without parking again to try to get the highest and best yield. The next site was the Harriman site. Again, this one really lent itself well to an SB9 subdivision, and so when you looked at this, we kind of went with the 2 primary units with the 2 ADUs. Again, prefacing that there's a range here, which I'll talk a little bit about the ROI, the reason why it could range, but this one currently has showing 4 parking stalls. Again, was nowhere near the FAR max. None of these are obviously architecturally how I assume all of you would represent it. They were just kind of testing what it could look like, and the last slide is probably going to be the most interesting. This is obviously one of the interesting ones because the new SB 1123 applies to this site. You can see the maximum yield could be 10 primary units with 10 JDUs if you were to subdivide. Without subdivision, obviously less yield. And so this is kind of a concept that we came up with about how you would leverage that. So going with 4 units, all with 2 bedrooms, and then 4 JDUs. Again, the 2 bedrooms were just reflective of the square footage that we were able to yield with the current parking stalls that we have on there. So this is kind of what I would say is the most interesting piece, and some of this is probably going to be pretty common sense. But the correlation analysis is telling us like where we see green again, we're seeing higher predictability for profitability, and some of this may be obvious to you. So as the lot prices obviously come down and you meet higher levels of affordability, we see strong correlation in the profit margins going up. As the number of units go up, also the profitability goes up, so the higher the density, the higher the opportunity for these to actually generate revenue. And then this one is probably the most interesting. I know it shows here that the 2 bedrooms all have a lot of negative correlation. The reason why that's happening is because what we found is in all of the unit mixes where you had at least 25 to 50% of the units were 1 bedroom, they naturally met the AMI and the LIPA and LIPA max benefits. And so what was happening is they technically were not super affordable, but were deemed affordable based on what the market was even able to generate. And so what we realized is you actually have to have a strategy to show different forms of 1 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, because that's the only way that these things are going to pencil. If you went in with all 3 bedrooms and you were trying to meet the affordability requirements, it'd be really difficult for it to profit, as you can see here. So the unit mix and typology is going to be really critical. And then again, obviously, it's interesting to see how the FAR, at scenario 3 kind of hits the highest. And so being mindful of how much of the floor area ratio you're covering, it's not necessarily the highest the FAR, the better outcome in terms of profitability. And so just being mindful that maximizing the site in terms of coverage is not going to be the thing that works. I think one of the biggest things we wanted to make sure that as you kind of embark on this process is realizing that it is going to be a bit of a journey before you even get into the ground. And so when you talk about your understanding of contracts, your understanding of lawyers and legal frameworks as you move through this, and then having certainty around making sure you have enough equity to kind of navigate that process. I think a lot of folks often don't buffer enough capital on the front end and run into cost challenges quite early. And so for us, I think we want to make sure that people are having enough capital capacity, have run multiple exit strategies about what's possible. And so those are probably just some of the things that we wanted to flag as what people need to be aware of as they navigate this process. I talked a little bit about the work that we do. And so, like I said, definitely visit the website. I'm not going to go out here and talk more about us, but I think this is an incredible opportunity. And I know there's a lot of skeptics, and I was one of them. And I think when you're pioneering, it's natural to have skeptics. And I think you're all in the room because I think what Manos has said time and time again, we're all learning. And the more that we can uncover here, the more the larger opportunity about how do you take 25,000 of these, vacant parcels and turn them into something else. Most of the cities that we've worked in and a lot of the work that we've done, we're tearing down existing homes in order to build more. And the fact that there's a ton of these vacant parcels and the city is interested in that to see is a really enormous opportunity. So that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions the best I can, but. Yeah. Do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, it's not yet, no. There's a state law that was passed, I think it's 1130, which allows cities to implement their own ordinance, and we have every expectation LA will do it and do it soon, but it's not on the books in LA yet.
We've done a pretty fair amount of research on how to move the units. Is there research that they will move? Is there a demographic that's going to spend $375,000 on a higher density villa or more?
I mean, well, we spoke to both the development community and the sale community, and so what we basically asked is if you were to produce these units at this square footage, would they trade at this number? I think what we understood is they would, and then the idea is a lot of those one bedrooms actually are getting some of the hopeful LIPA credits. And so for me, if we go back to the numbers, is can you take this unit and the benefits, sorry, I'm gonna go real fast here. Right here is like, can you actually create that benefit where you're seeing that dollar come back to you to then soften the cost that you would have to normally sell that unit for because you have a different audience through the LAHD program.
Typically, a higher density would require amenitization, parking, various elements that would be equal to the number that you're about to spend in order to get a demographic to spend. So, is rental completely out of the picture based on your market analysis?
Not based on the market analysis, I guess, but based on the program, yeah. I mean, we're really focused, or we're trying to focus on home ownership. That's been the goal from the beginning.
I think you said this, Manos, I think a building is better than no building. And so I don't think you guys are gonna not look at these. If no one's submitting because they can't make a pure sale work, I think the idea of could you build a few of these and then have a few of them as rental supports? I think that's probably something where there's a mix of ownership and rental, but I think it's just gonna be based on the application and the volume they see.
You guys talk about construction lenders and varying construction lenders with development. You guys have a couple of partners on the program as well.
We have, well, I think the answer to your question is no. We have the kind of pre-approved lenders, right, that the LHD works with for the buyers on the back end. Like I said, pre-development and construction. I guess that piece in the middle we haven't figured out just yet. The direct equity.
Part of the program is that something you guys are?
We'd like to. Yeah, I'm not sure if we'll be able to, but we'd like to.
mentioned that the 12 lots that were appraised in the past, will be appraised again.
Yeah.
Is there a way to say with the buyer, knowing that it could change, is there a way to get some guideline on where they're appraising now?
Yes, that will be attached to the RFQ, all that information. These numbers here on the slide, at least for these 4, are from that appraisal that Partner Engineering did for us. So yes, I don't see any reason, honestly, that we couldn't put that information out earlier if it's particularly useful for people to know, but it'll be an attachment in the RFQ. So once that's out, you'll see all that information.
It'd probably be a good idea for all of you to get your own market appraisals as well, because I'm assuming that would also influence what the market is.
Yeah. These were done in the last 3 months, intended specifically for this initiative. But yeah, sure.
Assuming this is a smashing success, assuming that you had way too many
Good assumption.
applicants coming in and your benches are deep, so deep, the city lab's already kind of amassing some of these private lot owners that we know do exist, that have, kind of once this all plays out and
Yeah.
that next stage will be, okay, we're gonna redo this with private
Yeah, that's where our head's going to. We're working on a number of things with Al as well. I'm trying to think about kind of how we can take what will hopefully be a really great success here on this handful of public lots and really sort of turn that over into private market. So yes, certainly we're thinking about that. I think there was a question further back. I'm not back. Go ahead.
So you mentioned about the partnership with Genesis on construction and the down payment system. Is there already is there a program in LEHD for the buyers qualifying? There's credit score issues and price rates and all that.
Yes, you can look up so this will be a slightly different from the LIPA and MIPA programs that currently exist, but using, the same requirements and stipulations. So you can find all that information online. Those are existing programs in the housing department. And they talk about sort of the credit requirements, you need to go to a couple educational classes before you qualify. All of those things are going to be the same for the affordable tenants. Does that answer the question?
We are also on the purchase side for the future homeowner.
Sorry, I keep using the wrong word.
On the buyers of the future units.
Yes.
There's already lenders, well, as part of whoever lined up to provide credit for.
Yes, well, LAHD has a list of pre-approved lenders and brokers that they work with. So yes, there is. That list isn't entirely public. I think sometimes it's hard to find, but LAHD has people they work with, and part of our job in terms of that, again, connecting the affordable units to the potential buyer, we'll be making that connection and making sure that they're finding. Go ahead, there's one behind you.
How are you enforcing whether the project is rented or sold, if the risk is all going to the developer?
That's a good question. I mean, the intention is, again, that this is a kind of conversation, let's say, or partnership after we've selected the team. We will be working closely with you and LAHD to make sure that things are moving along in that way. I don't think there's a particular strong mechanism to technically stop that from happening, but that's not what we'd like to happen. So I think that partnership would fall apart.
And then one follow-up question, is the land, can you clarify if the land is negotiable with the city based on the performer?
That's what we're expecting to happen, yes. So as you're putting together your pro forma, in the conversations we would be having with you then we're coming to terms with what is that, fair market value that's gonna make this thing work.
Can you walk through the timeline for the RFQ period and then the evaluation period?
Sure. Yeah, expecting the RFQ to go out in January, probably towards the end of January. There'll be 6 weeks or so to put together a submission. Let's say another month and a half for LHD to review. I'd say by the kind of late spring, early summer, we should have chosen, the benches will be out and we should have chosen the handful of teams that are working on those first projects. That's the first part of the timeline. After that, I guess it'll be dependent on how quickly projects move. But yeah, that's the first couple milestones. Go ahead.
You guys, I'm asking these questions to help you guys a little bit, but will the city be doing a historic analysis on all the sites before they release these to make sure there's no historic issues with any of the existing structures? And B, does the city, is the city releasing why they own the sites?
The latter, I don't know. With the the city will release that information on how they came to own the sites in the first place. But the first piece, yes, we have done. We've taken a look at the sort of historic designations. All of them, except for this one on Wilton, are also vacant. So yes, thank you for that. Someone maybe back there, I think, and they'll come to you.
Trying to keep up, I'm wondering if the slide will be available.
Yes, we will. We'll post the recording. We'll post the slides online. It's on the small lot stuff, CityLAB-UCLA, something like that website.
Question, follow-up concern about PRE.
Yeah, that's it. Fair
Corridor,
concern.
associated question, is small lot subdivision something that's considered part of smaller scale?
Yes, indeed. That's also related to this law that Al mentioned, this 1123 subdivision law, which kind of supercharges the ability for the small lot subdivision to happen. But yes, on a number of these sites, we think that'll be a reasonable strategy and one that will allow you to, create more units than you were before.
This was a subdivided lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the case of this subdivision lot, will there be support from planning, streamline across our subdivision?
Sure, yes, there will. And the other thing which is important to note is this new legislation, 1123, the city planning department just came out with an implementation memo about a month ago. It's obviously quite technical, but that's an important place to look for some information to really get a sense of what you'll be able to do in LA using the state law. Okay, cool. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Again, thanks for coming. Enjoy some more drinks. Obviously, Mingo, we can be here for a little bit longer. Submit questions if you have them. We'll try to get back. And thank you. Much appreciated.